Title: Shadows over Isandlwana. Prologue: the air in the valley was thick with tension. In the heart of Zululand, a warrior stood atop a rocky outcrop, staring down at the British encampment below. His body bore the scars of past battles, his gaze unreadable. He was Inlanla, a fierce warrior of King Cetshwayo's army. War was coming, and he would fight not for conquest, but for the land of his ancestors. Meanwhile, across the sea in London, a young officer, Lieutenant Edward Harrow, sat before his superior. Orders had come. The 24th Regiment of Foot was bound for Africa. Chapter 1. Into the heart of Zululand the red-coated soldiers marched across the dusty plains, their boots pounding the earth in rhythmic unison. Lieutenant Harrow, fresh from Sandhurst, felt an uneasy excitement. The Zulu, he had been told, were savages, fierce but undisciplined. As his unit crossed the Buffalo River, the golden grasslands stretched endlessly before them. Among them was an interpreter, William Daniels, who had lived among the Zulu. "Do not underestimate them, Lieutenant," Daniels warned. "They fight with honor and skill." Chapter 2. Unlikely bonds. As the British Army set up camp, Harrow encountered a captured Zulu scout named Mbiyazi. Unlike the brutal warriors Harrow had imagined, Mbiyazi was composed and articulate. Through Daniels, Harrow conversed with him. "Why do you fight?" Harrow asked. "Why do you invade?" Mbiyazi countered. In those brief moments, Harrow saw not an enemy, but a man defending his home. He loosened the ropes binding Mbiyazi's hands. "Go. I won't stop you." Mbiyazi hesitated, but then vanished into the tall grass. Chapter 3. The gathering storm. Inlanla and his warriors had been watching. The British were confident, too confident. King Cetshwayo had forbidden unnecessary bloodshed, but war was now inevitable. Messages flew across the land, summoning warriors from distant kraals. The sky darkened as thousands of Zulu assembled, their spears glinting under the moonlight. "We strike at dawn," their commander whispered. At the British camp, Harrow remained restless. There was an eerie silence. Chapter 4. The massacre at Isandlwana. As the sun rose over Isandlwana, the British encampment was suddenly engulfed in chaos. From the hills, 20,000 Zulu warriors surged forward in the infamous Buffalo Horn formation. War cries shattered the air. Harrow, sword drawn, fought beside his comrades as the Zulu overwhelmed the unfortified camp. Soldiers fired desperately, but ammunition ran low. Inlanla's spear found its mark again and again. Harrow saw friends cut down, the red soil turning darker with blood. He ran, not out of cowardice, but survival. Chapter 5. The last stand. In the final moments of the battle, a group of British soldiers made a last stand on a small hill. Harrow, wounded and exhausted, fired his revolver until it clicked empty. Inlanla locked eyes with him. There was no hatred, only duty. "You fought well," Inlanla said in his native tongue before striking with the flat of his blade, knocking Harrow unconscious instead of killing him. Chapter 6. The defense of Rorke's Drift. Meanwhile, at Rorke's Drift, a small garrison of British troops prepared for what seemed to be an unwinnable battle. 11 Victoria Crosses would be earned that day as they defended against wave after wave of Zulu warriors. Among the defenders was Private Henry Hook, who fought fiercely despite his previous reputation as a troublemaker. When the Zulu finally withdrew, the defenders collapsed from exhaustion, their hands trembling on their rifles. Chapter 7. The aftermath. Harrow awoke in a Zulu kraal, his wounds tended by Mbiyazi. "You spared me," he whispered. "As you did for me," Mbiyazi replied. Meanwhile, Inlanla sat before his chieftain, the weight of victory heavy upon him. Isandlwana was a triumph, but Rorke's Drift proved that the British would not be easily broken. The war was far from over. Epilogue. Shadows and ashes. Months later, the British retaliated with overwhelming force. The Zulu capital was burned, their warriors scattered. Harrow, now hardened by war, returned home but found no glory in the victory. Inlanla and Mbiyazi faded into legend, their fate unknown. The land they had fought for remained, but at a terrible cost. The Anglo-Zulu War was not just a clash of arms, but a collision of worlds. And in its wake, only shadows remained over Isandlwana.